Hello, in this video, we are going to configure a router. In this network, we can see that the computers and laptops are already connected to a switch. The connections between these devices are already green, which means they are communicating properly. But the communication between the switch and the router is still at red because we need to configure the router so that it can send data properly from the router to the switch to the devices. To do this, we must go to the router CLI, enter privilege mode, and here we can see the clock, the router's clock. As we can see, the router's clock is not synchronized with our device's clock. To change this, we can use the clock set command. Check the clock again, and we can see that the time is already changed. We can also change the router's name and IP addresses. To do this, we must configure the terminal. But we can also use a simplified command for this. For example, to enter the configure command, we can use conf, and it will enter the terminal, a configuration terminal. Also, to change the name, we must use hostname and give the router a name. For example, home network, and we can immediately see the change in here. We can see that the router is not yet connected properly. To see the problem, we can use show IP interface to check the interfaces of the router. And the switch is connected to the router at fast Ethernet 0/0. We can see that there is no IP address assigned to that port and the status is administratively down. To change this, we must go back to configure terminal, interface the port F0/0 and assign an IP address. We can see here that the fast Ethernet 0/0 has already an IP address, but its status is still administratively down. We must go back. To change this, we must go back to the configure terminal and to change the interface at F0/0. And to change the status, we use the command no shutdown. And here it's already logged that we changed the interface fast Ethernet 0/0 to state up. We can check it again at show IP interface and see that the status of fast Ethernet 0/0 is already up. And here we can see that the connection between the router and the switch is already green. Another thing we can do is add an interface loopback. To do this, in loopback 0. Here it's already logged that we add a loopback 0 and it automatically change the state to up. You can check at show IP in brief. You can see the loopback 0 is already here and it's up, but we don't have an IP address assigned to it. Zero. Yeah, we assigned an IP address to the loopback. Can see that the loopback 0 already has an IP address. Another thing that we can configure in our router is to add a password so that only authorized personnel or individuals can configure the router. To do this, we must go back to configure terminal. Type line console 0, use command password, then add the password that we'll be using. For example, content quiz. Type in login to signify that every time you log in to the router, it will ask for a password. Another thing we can add is to have a banner message. To do this, we use banner, and we can use message of the day, MOTD space hash, and this will ask us for the message that we want the router to display. You can say hello, authorized individuals only. Please enter your password. And to end the message, we use hash. To test this, we exit the router settings and press enter, and here is our message of the day that we entered, and it's asking for a password to verify our identity. Then after entering the password, we're back into configuring the routers. Another thing that we must take into consideration is that all the things that I edited are only in the running configuration, meaning if there is a loss in power in the router, or we turned off and on the router, the settings that we change will be lost. To change this and to save a copy, to save the running copy to the startup copy, we can use copy running config or run to start to the starting config, and we'll ask the destination file startup config, press enter, and there we go. So change this and turn off the router and back on. Here we are, router, press enter. Here's our message asking for our password, enter it, and we can go back in. Thank you for watching the video.